Hi everyone, in today's video we have my build for the Diecast Mafia Gaslands Diorama challenge. Now this video is quite late because I had a few setbacks, as you'll see later on in the video, as well as for the past week I've been ill with a cold. As you can see in the turntable, we have a previous entry to the Diecast Mafia Camper challenge, which I did a few years back. I built this little zombie diorama. I always planned to rebase this at some point, but I never got around to it and it just kind of sat gathering dust. So I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to fix everything wrong with it. And since it was already half done, it'd be a quick and easy project for the beginning of the year, which unfortunately it wasn't. On to some sadder news. I'm sure all of you have heard by now that 2A Cats has passed away. He was known throughout the toy car community, whether you were a collector or a builder. He always commented on people's videos, offering helpful tips and advice. I'll always miss shooting ideas back and forth for future builds, either here on YouTube or over on DeviantArt, where we'd always joke that we were the last two builders over there because everyone else had moved over to Instagram. And he's going to be greatly missed by everyone here, I'm sure. With everything disassembled, the first part I'm going to work on is this Zuru White Fang, which I'd previously cut the front end off and added a bone shaker engine to. Using the many pieces from the diorama, I reattach which I presume is the original front end for this car. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it's the original one that's on this. Unfortunately, I've long since used the original fenders on another build, so I'll have to use these ones off another Zuru car that I cut up for the parts for the diorama. I can't remember which car this was. But as you can see, I need to trim them down to fit. I'm only adding the one to kind of give the idea that this car's kind of still being worked on. Next, I took this Hot Wheels to induction, which I plan to hack up and turn into a wreck car that's been parted out. So after de-riveting this off camera, I first cut off one of the pillars on the roof. This will make it easier to kind of crush the roof in, because I want this thing to look like it's been in a roll. I then cut off the passenger's door because, like I said, this thing has been in a roll, so it's pretty swung open and been torn off. Next, I cut out the engine, as I want the car to look like it's part way through being stripped for parts. Since I'd cut the door off the body, I needed to trim the door on the interior piece. So I just used my sprue cutters to cut a chunk of it out and then use my hobby knife to clean up. They also cut away some of the engine bay, because again I'm trying to sell the idea that they've already pulled the engine from this. This proved very difficult at first with my hobby knife, so I went back and used my sprue cutters to kind of hack at it, and then used my hobby knife to kind of clean up the cuts. To add more damage to the body, I used a file to kind of rough up the body and just gouge chunks of it out, to kind of sell the idea that this thing had been damaged in the multiple rolls it took. Next I decided to add some piles of tyres, so I grabbed a load of wheels for my bits box, all from previous Gaslands cars, and using my sprue cutters I cut the axles in half to get the wheels off. After I had plenty of tyres to work with, I then began to glue them randomly together and create random piles like so. I felt the other car was missing a hood, so I decided to add another hood from a bits box, because again I'm pretty sure I've used the original hood on another build. Now it's starting to look a lot like the Cadillac from the Johnny Cash song One Piece at a Time. If you've never heard that song, it's about a guy who works at a Cadillac factory and he keeps stealing parts to build his own Cadillac, and he ends up with a Frankenstein Cadillac, which is kind of the idea for this diorama. The idea is this guy's just kind of building his race car on a budget and just stripping parts from previously wrecked cars. For the crew I'm going to be using some figures from the Dark Alliance 172 scale Rednecks figure pack. Tried to pick up a few guys who didn't have guns and looked like they had tools, and we've got this guy with a pitchfork, a guy with an axe and a guy with a chainsaw. First thing I need to do is clean up the flashing on the figures using my hobby knife like so. And then trim down the pitchfork and axe to make it look more like they're working on a car than fighting off zombies. I'll paint these guys off camera because it's a little easier than trying to paint them through the viewfinder on my phone, as well as I'm trying to cut down the painting because I really don't do anything special, so I'm trying to cut down the painting side of things because you don't need to be bored with that. Onto the camera, which is a Hot Wheels Super Rigs tuned up. I need to reverse the anti-zombie armour on the windows. So I start by using my hobby knife to kind of split this open again so I can get inside. And then just use me needle nose pliers to pull away all the armour on the windows. Off camera I'll clean up around the edges of the windows. Now onto the new base. For this I always plan to use this picture frame that I bought from Hobbycraft some time ago. And one of the things I wanted to do that I didn't get time to do last time was add a fence. So I'm using the camper for scale and I measure out how big the panels I'm going to need to make are. For the fence panels I'm using this corrugated card. I'm just marking them out, measuring them and then cutting them. And here's a little quick look of how they look alongside the camper. I then remove the backing so they look more like corrugated steel. Next, the fence is going to need a frame, so I gather up some square styrene rod and some flat strips. And then measure out and cut these to the size that I'll need. And begin assembling the frame. I then assemble the frames to be a little bit bigger than I need, so the panels can overlap, like so. Once I've assembled all the frames, I then attach them all together to make a row. And once the fence rows are completed, I can attach them to the base. With this done, I can now begin attaching the fence panels, and for the fence panels I'm going to use some white glue or PVA glue. This is so I can move things around as I'm assembling. Now I knew going in that these being cardboard that they would warp with the glue, but I kind of wanted to use this to my advantage because I knew this would make them look worn and damaged like a real fence would, because these fences wouldn't stay perfect. They'd get nudged, they'd get damaged, and they'd warp and bend and look all sorts of out of place. So it was basically just free weathering. Before I could start painting the base, I decided I'd remove it from the frame because I didn't want to have to touch up the frame again. So I wouldn't have to repaint the outer edges of the frame. As you may have kind of noticed, I've also decided to change how I'm doing the painting. I realise a lot of my old videos is just a big block of me doing the painting and just listing off the paints, and there's nothing really special to it, and it just adds time to the videos and pads the videos out. So I'm kind of trimming back on the details of the paint. I'm sure any builders who are following this have got their own paints that they prefer to use, so I'm just going to lay out the basic colours that I use, and then the rest, well, you've all got your own colours and your own preferred choices of paint. Just kind of cuts the videos down and doesn't make them as long as they don't need to be. So for the concrete base I used some Revell Aquacolor Gunship Grey because it was the closest grey I had. For the fence I used some Revell Aquacolor Rust for the base, and then stippled on over the top of that some Revell Aquacolor Fern Green to give it that nice rusty effect. I also used some Revell Light Blue in the same fashion to kind of show that some of the panels have been replaced over the years. And then apply a homemade black wash to blend everything together and give it all that nice little dirty and grimy look. Back to the camper, I repaint it with some Revell Aquacolor Aluminium. For the original race car I used some Revell Aquacolor Stone Grey. The idea is to make it look like it's been primed halfway through, because there's about halfway through building it, but the back half of the car they've already kind of primed because they're finished with that bit. For the wreck I apply a base coat of Revell Rust, and then stipple on over the top of that with some Revell Fiery Red. The idea is this has been wrecked for a while and it's kind of slowly rusting away. So at this point I hit a speed bump. Unfortunately some of the black wash had kind of pulled up in areas on the base, and every time I tried to correct this the paint would just flake off. So I tried repainting it and reapplying the black wash, and did this several times, and decided the best course of action was probably because I hadn't prepped the surface properly. If you're using plastics, it's usually best to kind of sand them a bit before you apply the paint. And when I went to sand, I realised what I thought was originally like Perplex plastic, because it was just a cheap picture frame, was actually glass. The paint wasn't going to stick to it at all. So I was forced to remove the fence and then redo everything onto the backboard of the picture frame. Now back on track, I add some shrubbery just to give it a bit more of a overgrown look, like so. Next, to show that cars are constantly being worked on in this place, I add some oil stains, which are just me adding pools of black wash here and there. Back to the camper, I wanted to add some windows. Sadly there's not much detail inside, as it was meant to haul a car in the back, hence I painted the inside black to kind of hide the lack of detail. For the windows, I'm going to be using this clear plastic from TT Combat, which I use to add windows to the MDF building kits that I use from there. I just need to cut it to shape and then I can glue it in place using some white glue so that the windows won't fog up, because if you use any other kind of glue it will kind of fog the windows. You can kind of see the effect where the light catches it just enough, so you can see that there's some glass there, but you can't see into it and see that there's nothing in there. I just had to tackle the curved window at the back off camera because I knew it was going to be a bit of a pain. It was one of the reasons why I armoured up the windows in the first place when I first built the diorama. But yeah, I figured it was going to take me a while to figure this out, and it did. So skipping forward a good bit, you can see I've got the windows in now, and in the end I had to add some pillars to it and then use a series of clamps to kind of get everything to hold together and glue in place. At one point I debated using super glue, even though I knew that would kind of ruin it, but luckily it worked out in the end and I didn't have to. And here we have the final build. Everything was going quite smoothly until the end of the build, and then I hit a few speed bumps. Now originally I intended to glue everything back down to the base and put it back into the picture frame, but I realised it would just get put back on a shelf and left to gather dust like last time. So with nothing permanently glued down, I can use this a lot in my animations, because now I've got a nice little walled off fence area which can be used as it is a little workshop, or I can use it as a little outpost or a staging area for future races, as you'll probably be seeing here. Kind of thinking of getting a few more camper vans in the future and turn this into a little trailer park, or maybe a vehicle storage area or a supply depot. Basically it just gives me a lot of different potential for future animations, instead of just being one static proc that's going to be sat on my shelf gathering dust and doing nothing. Now I can use pieces of it in animations, or do different things with it. Anyway, like usual, there'll be a nice little slideshow of the glamour shots. There's no animation because I put the animation at the beginning in, thinking I was going to build this into a static prop. And as usual, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.